But as somebody who worked primarily with participatory institutions, I look at TICTeC as technologies that are designed to promote, hopefully, inclusive participation, and also that promote government's response that, on the other hand, is inclusive itself. For strongest predictor to be an online voter is to use social networks. But afterwards come a pattern that we see often in other studies. You're more likely to be male, and you're more likely to have a higher income and more education, right? And in a process that was created to redistribute resources to the poor people, as in the case of participatory budgeting, you might start wondering what is happening there. This is one lesson here that you might take away. The fact that person has a technology, don't believe that they know how to use it automatically. And there's another curiosity here, because people many times, they say, I know how to use SMS, and they use SMS. But it's because they know only how to reply. They don't know how to start an SMS. And here's one thing. Look at this detail. How do you join your report? You join your report by texting the word join. So those people who say that can use SMS, maybe many of them cannot join your report because they cannot start an SMS. Fix My Street started with very few female participation, but as it went across time, female participation increased. So when you look at petitions across the world on change.org, what you find is that women sign much more petitions than men, but men are more likely to create petitions. So here's one thing. If women are participating more, but men are creating those petitions, are men setting the agenda? Let's forget the issue of inclusiveness and move to another thing. When people participate, do governments respond? First predictor that we find is that if you say please on a report, it's more likely, which is very British, of course. If you add a photo, you do increase a bit the odds of having a report fixed on Fix My Street, and if you're a male. So the bias is not only on who is participating, but the bias is also on the response. What we find is that women mobilize more signatures than men. So in average, when a woman starts a petition, she gets 432 signatures, and men 273. In the end, what you find is that women-created petitions are 1.4 times as likely to be successful as male-created petitions. A democracy is extremely responsive to its domestic audience, but if you make it for other audiences, they do not respond to petitions that are started abroad. When you go to an autocracy, it's the opposite. If you're in an autocracy, petitions that are started in the country, no matter how many signatures they give, they don't give a damn. Another thing that we found looking at change.org is that civil society organizations are not more efficient when they start a change.org petition if you control for the number of signatures. We need to understand better responsiveness. We've been focusing a lot on the profile of participants, and I think that we start to have a vision of who participates. It's something that we can handle, including with institutional design. But what makes governments respond for us is still very unclear, or even when it is clear for us, we seem to forget that the moment that we're designing TICTeC. You still left with 3 questions about Fix My Street. 1, considering it works, why does it work? 1, it can be the governments take action based on their access to distributed information. So Fix My Street could be just like a closed system in which I would send an email to the government and the government would fix it. So it is about knowing that there's a pothole. The other one is that governments are taking action because there's a naming and shaming effect. So I'm doing that because it is public and it shows my rates. And maybe, and very likely, governments take action for both of the reasons above. But even if that's the case, we don't know which degree, which one has the strongest effect. Why is extremely important knowing that? Because if you know that, you can design a much better fix my street. At this moment, how much should we be focusing on what happened in between elections or on what happens in elections as well? And I think that understanding what technology can do in these different places and what can make governments respond and how we can make more inclusive, it is what will make us different from our historical predecessors. And if we don't do that, our fate of civic tech and everybody else is here will not be very different of that of the Napoleonic telegraph. Thank you.